So, welcome back everybody. I'm impressed by your discipline, how fast you got back when the signal sounded. I take it as an indication of the quality of this conference and the interest that you show in what is being said from the stage. And I bet you will not be disappointed by the way we're going to continue. Our next speaker is a real top chef from Sweden. The word celebrity chef has the wrong connotation. He is not a celebrity chef. He is one of the very best chefs we have, but not because he's a celebrity, but because he's a champion of value-based cooking. And he's preaching on television every Friday, and he has a very large number of followers. On top of it, he has his restaurant, which is in the Photographic Museum of Stockholm, has been named the best museum restaurant in the world. I haven't tried them all, but so far he's at least in the top league of the ones I've seen. And he's also internationally recognized. He was in the Bocuse d'Or, you know, the informal world championships of male chefs. Of chefs. I don't know if there have ever been any female chefs, or if you are there has been one. So I thought there were a quota so that only men could be there. But it's good to hear. Where he competed successfully and got a very good ranking, although he did not win, at least not the first time. So welcome, Paul Svensson. We're keen to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Leif Begotsky, and thank you, the organization, for inviting me. I'm so proud and honored to be here today and to be able to speak of the things we do and the values we share with our guests. We have this saying, and it's been with us for a few years. We call it sustainable pleasure. And the main thing with this is that it's really hard to sell sustainability in a restaurant and keep on having guests, especially if you have a really large restaurant. You always need to start with selling pleasure, and the sustainability is an add-on value. But to start correctly, we need to start with the past. I heard yesterday, actually, the speakers Marcus and Michelle had a really good speech last night, and they were telling us a lot about where we come from, what kind of traditions we have, and as a Swedish, and I think a lot of Americans could recognize themselves in a meat, potato, and sauce culture. Me as well. I'm grown up in a small village outside Helsingborg on the west coast. I want to be precise. It's on the west coast. It's a little bit further down, though, in the south part of the west coast, Helsingborg. But outside Helsingborg, actually, it's a small village. It has sort of the name on one side and goodbye on the other side. But we were a few, and I was grown up there with some really, really good, tasty food. But it was meat, sauce, and potatoes. And the thing about this, it was really tasty, but it has a sort of a particular fullness when you're done that you are almost cracking open because you need to have it all. That's the thing. We're not allowed to leave anything on the plate, so you had it all, and you had some more, and you had some more, and then you finished off as a reward in my grandfather's old 70s chair, unbuttoning 2 buttons. But saying that is what we come from, is what we actually want to do today is to create the new tradition. And we had 2 years ago, this is quite new, this restaurant, but 2 years ago we had the opportunity to do this correctly in all different sort of ways out of, you know, the perspective of what we know, our knowledge. But we wanted to start to do it differently in a way that we're not going to sell sustainability. We're going to compete on the same sort of ground as all the other restaurants, but we're going to add on a few other things into this restaurant, and we're going to do it totally differently, communication-wise. It looks like an ordinary restaurant, but it's quite big. And I've been running restaurants, Michelin restaurants, for so many years, and they're always small. And the thing with smallness is it's a lot easier to do particularly really good food, of course, but it's also very few guests you meet every night. And to get many hits, you need many seats if you want to tell someone something. So we wanted to start a really, really large restaurant. So this is the main restaurant. We also have another 200 seats in sort of a company seating area in the other end of the building. And we also have a coffee shop. We actually do the same thing everywhere, but the restaurant is a lot easier to sort of give them the message. But the thing about running a restaurant with 120 seats is that you don't have the same amount of time to explain to the guests what we do and why we do it and what are you going to have this evening. So the food needs to explain itself in a way. And that's why we started with that we want to work with nature. And it sounds, it sounds like something we should do, or it sounds like everyone else is doing it, but we're not. We're actually not running a restaurant nowadays with nature. We are trying to affect nature in a way so it's easier for us. And if we want to do a restaurant with a lot of seats, we need to be more specific when we order stuff and all sorts of things. But in the end of the day, if we want to do sort of a sustainable restaurant and we want to be seasonable, we need to explain it in a way that the guest actually understands what seasonable is. So we created something else. We created plant dishes. And the main thing with the plant dish is that if you walk into any sort of restaurant anywhere in the world, the normal way to present the food is to call it cod with kale and horseradish, or it's beef with potatoes and carrots. But we do it the opposite way, because we want to do the best food, the most tastiest food you can get, and you need the correct, seasonable, organically grown, lovable, beautiful product with as much taste intensity as possible to create this sort of pleasureful food. So it's quite easy because you need to actually explain the dish through the vegetable. You start with the vegetables, so you actually explain the dish through the vegetables. And that also creates a new balance, a new proportion, because you start with the vegetable and you give less space to everything else. It's not a vegetarian restaurant, but a lot of the dishes is vegetarian or vegan. But it's not the main thing. The main thing is to cherish the vegetable, to start with the plant, to create something new. Because we are so used to having all the vegetables as a side, so we do it the opposite. We serve the meat and the fish and the shellfish as a side, as sort of a communication for us to tell you that this is going to be a new experience of maybe the same dishes you had before. It could be a traditional dish, we just turn it upside down. So we start with the vegetable to create something that you actually know about, but you haven't seen this sort of proportions before. And actually the main thing with this is diversity today. Because if you have a restaurant with 120 seats, you also have 120 different sort of human beings walking in every day. And there's not a single one that is similar. We're all unique. We all look into food in our own unique way. So we need to create sort of the food that we actually can share. We can actually travel together. And mainly, people can share vegetables or plants. All of us, except for if you're allergic or anything like that. But normally, we can share vegetables. So if you start with the vegetable to create the dish around the vegetable, we can actually share the whole dish except for the meat and fish. And that's an add-on. You can bring it on if you like or if you don't, because the plant dish is complete on its own. But you could actually have some meat if you are so looking forward to it, but you don't need to. And everyone that I meet, actually, that's been to the restaurant normally says that when they're there the first time, they have plant dishes and they have the side. But the second time, they mainly don't choose it because they think it's good enough without it. And this is a way of showing sort of the guest that there's different ways of looking at it. You don't need to take the meat away straight away. You could do it a little bit softly. And at the same time, you experience plants and vegetables in a different way that you would normally not see. Because when you walk into the normal restaurant anywhere and you ask for vegetarian food, you normally get the dish without the meat or the fish. That's not a complete dish. That's not love. That's not cooking. It's just a compromise. And we don't like compromises. We like really, really great food. And the thing with this, it leaves us, because the only thing you can have in the restaurant is 100 grams of meat or fish or shellfish. We choose that because we want you to actually experience really, really tasty fish or really, really tasty meat. And we want you to enjoy it differently. Less and really good. But also at the same time, we offer a lot of things that you would normally don't get in a restaurant. This is a weird question, but how many people in here have had goat cheese, for an example? Yeah, it's not uncommon, is it? But how many of you have actually had the goat? There's a few in here. But the thing with this, on the market, it's really, really hard to get hold of sort of minced goat. But you can actually get the milk, you can get the cheese, but you can't get the goat. So this is sort of a way also to explore the perspective of meat. It doesn't contain only cow or calf or lamb. There's so much else to offer, actually, except for the things that we already know. But also, at the same time, looking into the quality of meat. Because the main thing for us is the pursuit of flavor. We're not in it for the quantity. We're in it for the quality of flavor. So if we leave it in a sort of a less proportion, we also manage to have a lot more expensive meat, and probably this would be a 6 or 7 year old milk cow with the right sort of food, with the right sort of flavor, and it also provided us with milk and cheese while it was living. This is a different way of looking at the meat perspective, but there's so much else to meat. Because the thing is that on the menu we only have 2 sides. The rest of it could be something else, like alternative proteins. The beans, the seeds, the lentils, all that sort of thing have always been sort of a thing that we use to get full, to sort of expand the plate. But nowadays we start to explore what it actually tastes like. Buckwheat is not something you need to do flour on to provide a pancake. Buckwheat actually tastes something. You could actually roast it for maybe 10 hours on really, really low temperature, and it becomes almost like chocolate. And when you grind that with fat, it becomes a really, really tasty snack. But you don't look at it flavor-wise. You look at it as a product that could provide something else. As for an example, the smell. I'm into a project together with a few people in here that we were looking into protein or plant-based protein in a flavor-wise way. Not to sort of take the meat away. It's actually to widen the way of looking at protein. This could be sort of the new minced, not meat, but minced something that we can actually use in the similar way that we already know how to use it. Because the problem is when you provide a product that people don't know how to use or how to cook, it's going to take a while. But if you could provide something that actually comes out in the same sort of texture-wise as we heard about Impossible Foods, that's brilliant. Because people are looking for things that already know, but could be sort of a tasty example of what we could use else instead of this. Just Mayo is the same thing. I was there visiting them, looking into sort of the Mayo business. It's quite amazing how we actually look at an egg yolk only as an emulsifier, not as flavor. When you do a mayonnaise, it's mainly because it's a really good sauce. So if you could find sort of the same emulsifier in yellow Canadian pea, that's amazing. It doesn't really have to do if it's vegan or not. We don't need to use egg yolks to do mayonnaise because it doesn't have the flavor-wise perspective of the sauce. We don't need it in there. We just need an emulsifier. And the thing with this is that it comes out really more tastier than with eggs. And that's a good product. Impossible Food and Beyond Meat has already been here, but there's also examples of looking at things out of a flavor-wise perspective. We could do differently. We could do something that people actually know how to use and that they actually would be looking forward to. And we have insects. There's been so many things going on with insects the last year or two for me. We did this experiment with kids at school in Sweden who were supposed to do a sustainable sandwich. And to do the sustainable sandwich, we were supposed to use only plant-based products and we were supposed to use insects. And I rarely have been using insects, but I'm not a scary person. I'm not scared of things, I would say. But the thing is, when you start with something that actually people are looking at and almost throwing up when you tell them that this is going to be sort of a new experience for you, and you can actually see it crawl, it's hard to sort of give them a pleasureful view of what they're going to have. But the thing with this is if you look into it the same way as we did with the buckwheat, if you look at an ant out of a flavor perspective, it's quite amazing to see if you just use this weaver ant from the south part of Latin America and you roast it and you dry it and you grind it, it becomes almost like raspberries. It's just a beautiful sweet and sour flavor and a little bit of earthiness. And if you combine that with the macaron sort of mixture and you cook it the similar way and you just fill it up with some really good cream, it comes out like a really, really tasty thing. The problem is, if you tell them it's ants, they're going to throw up. But I think the main thing to reach to guests is through flavor. You can always convince someone by try it and then tell me afterwards if it's good enough. But if you just tell them that this is going to be the salvation of poorness or whatever it could be, it's not going to work. We need to work through pleasureness, through the mouth, through the stomach. It's the only way to make cricket as a pizza, because cricket flour is just amazing. It's just amazing how it enhances the actual wheat flavor of the bread, for an example. It's an enhancer. It's the new form of umami. You use it to enhance something else that it actually tastes like. So if you cook your bread or if you do your pizza dough with this sort of cricket flour, it actually becomes even more tasty than it was before. Oi. I'm not going to skip this one because this is important. Algae is the most amazing thing. We talk about plant-based products. We talk about seasonal vegetables on land. But we always forget that there's so much else underneath the ocean than fish and shellfish. There's so much more there to explore and so much flavor there to explore. I just heard the other day that there's about 100,000 different sort of species. And we just know a few. I've heard about 12, I think, or 15. There's a lot more to explore. But the thing about this, we just talk about it as protein, as something from the ocean that tastes like water, it tastes like salty water. But it doesn't. It actually has sort of a multiple flavor. This one, for an example, is named the sea bean. We have it at the restaurant at the moment. It actually tastes a little bit like licorice. It has a beautiful licorice flavor to it. And when you combine that with the right things, like for an example, at this time it's beetroots, it's unmature apples, and it's a grated beautiful cheese, it becomes the most amazing pasta you've ever had. It's nutritious, of course, but mainly it's an amazing flavor. And it's from the ocean, and it's the right season. Because it actually has seasons. It has a spring season, it has an autumn season, but we don't know about it. Because there's only 2 harvesters in Sweden, and we have 1 on land. But there's only 2 at the moment that knows about what actually exists underneath the surface. There's so much more to explore there, flavor-wise, and also sort of a solution, but we need to talk about it flavor-wise. How can we actually put it into the system to become sort of the new tradition of food? Bolognese with a flavor of protein would be the correct way, I think. Because Bolognese is sort of the mark of gastronomy for me. It's the form of slow cooking where you add a lot of different sort of flavors into a pot. You leave it there to simmer. You leave it there to enhance each other's flavors for quite some time. It's not a meat sauce. That's where we go wrong. Bolognese doesn't have anything to do with a meat sauce. It's a sauce made of an enormous amount of ingredients. And it becomes even better if you use it as a flavor. If you use meat, or it could be peas, or it could be algae, or it could be something else, to combine with tomatoes, carrots, leeks, garlic, thyme, a lot of fresh and conserved tomatoes, to become a really, really tasty sauce for pasta. It doesn't actually have to contain cow to become good. And the last bit of the restaurant is to look at, we talk about waste as a problem. It's the solution. Waste is the solution, if we want to look at it that way. Because when you walk into sort of the production system of a restaurant, it's only creativity that sets up for waste. If you think about it before you start to do it, you normally end up with 0 waste. And that's the main thing about waste. And we have a good friend over in England. His name is Douglas McMaster, who runs the first zero-waste restaurant in Europe. And he has so many good thoughts about how actually waste could be sort of the new ingredients. What does actually waste taste like? If you look at waste as a new ingredient, it's also a way of exploring your restaurant or developing your restaurant. Because there's a lot of new ingredients that we normally wouldn't use. I had this picture of a cauliflower, the first picture I had. That's the way you can actually buy a cauliflower nowadays. But for my 42 years, you've always bought a cauliflower without the leaves. But mainly, a cauliflower contains of 3/3 of leaves. It's actually a cabbage. It's not a fruit. It's not a flower, it's a cabbage. And it's closer to the sun, it is more tasty, and it's more flavor intense, the leaves. The thing inside is sort of a add-on. It's the leaves that actually is the thing with the cauliflower. But we look at it as waste. So it's cut off before it even hits the stores or before it even hits the restaurant. But that's waste, and it's been waste for ages. But nowadays, it might be the main ingredients in the dish, and the actual flour becomes something else. But circularity is a way of knowing your restaurant. It's a way of exploring a restaurant. For an example, this is a picture taken of a colleague of mine, that when we bought the Swiss chard, we also get the roots. So we replant the roots and we get a new harvest. So this is the second harvest of the same Swiss chard that would normally just end up, the roots would end up in the compost. But in the end of the day, we also have an industrial compost at the restaurant. So if we can't take care of it, it becomes compost. And we could give it back to the farmer. And we get vegetables in return. So this is also a way of exploring new flavors, because we can actually cook in the compost. Have you ever had anything cooked in a compost? It's just totally, insanely flavor intense. Because the main thing with the compost is that it actually enhances the natural flavor and nutritious value when you cook it in it. And it's waste. But in a few years, this is going to be the most intense, flavor-wise thing that you can use to actually cook plant-based products. How's my time? It's okay. At the end of the day, if we do really pleasurable food in a sustainable way, we choose them in a sustainable, conscious way, this is the best add-on you can get to dinner. When you've had it, you enjoyed it, you go back home, and you also realize that this is really healthy for you. Eating more plant-based product and less red meat is really good for you. That's also a form of pleasure. You can't sell it, but it's a good add-on value in the end of the day when you leave the restaurant. That's it for me. Thank you.